There's a brouhaha going on at the Ukrainian border. The Russians have amassed over 100,000 troops. They're not there just to be seen. Putin would love to rebuild the Soviet Union of the past and recreate the great empire that once was. And I think he's trying to see just what the reaction of the world will be. In my newsletter at MikeHuckabee.com, we had a guest column this week by Colonel Ken Allard, who was the former dean of the Army War College at West Point. And we asked him to write it because that was one of his specialties, was Russia and what they do and why they do it. And in his column, it was a very interesting insight. He said that the Russian history goes all the way back to when Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union. And his philosophy, which obviously has been adopted by Putin, was that you fix the bayonet to your rifle and you charge forward. If you hit mush, you keep going. If you hit steel, you stop and retreat. So the whole idea is, what will Putin face when he stabs the bayonet and tries to make his invasion into Ukraine? Will he hit the mush of unsound and untested policies and a very weak world reaction, or will he meet steel? And what he meets will determine whether he keeps going or whether he stops and calls it, oh, it's just a training exercise. So that's what's really, I think, to be watching for, is how far will he go and what will be the world reaction. Now, on one hand, it's easy to argue, excuse me, that there really isn't an American interest in that border, and that's true. The bigger question is, why do we care so much about that border when we don't seem to be caring about our own border? And that, to me, is something worth talking about. Excuse me. Joe Biden's Deputy National Security Advisor, in fact, talked about borders ought to be inviolate. Watch.
Should Americans care about what's happening in Ukraine?
Because it goes to a very fundamental principle of all nations, which is that our borders should be inviolate, that our sovereignty should be respected.
It's an interesting thing to hear. Thank you very much. That's a bottle of water. I promise that's all it is just water, but I'm going to be getting onto that here pretty soon, and a cough drop. I find it just amazing that he's talking about we ought to make sure, because borders are what makes a country. Right. And I'm thinking, has he ever been to the Rio Grande? Does he have any idea that 2 million people have already, in the past year, crossed over that border illegally? We're not caring at all about our own borders, and we're worried about what's happening to the border in Ukraine. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. So it's just bizarre. One of the reasons that our border matters is not just because of the people, but it's because of the thousands of pounds of drugs that are coming into the country, enough to kill every man, woman, boy, and child in the country several times over. Fentanyl is just flowing into the border. And this is not something that is stopping at the Texas border. This is going to Ohio and to Michigan and to Vermont and to Washington State. So I don't care where you live, the fentanyl that comes into your community that may be sold to your grandchild, it ought to be of concern to you that it's coming. Here's Governor Abbott talking about why this is so important.
Every man, woman, and child in all of the states together here combined. That is how deadly this is. Doses to kill more than 222 million Americans are sweeping our states for one reason only. Joe Biden does not care that fentanyl is invading our states.
Well, it certainly would appear that somebody in the White House doesn't care a whole lot, because they're not doing anything to stop it. In fact, they're chartering airplanes and flying illegal aliens all over the country. There was some footage this week that was just shocking. A charter jet landing in the middle of the night in Westchester County, New York, which is, by the way, just above New York City. I mean, when you leave the borough, the 5 boroughs of New York, and you get out of that particular county, you go into Westchester County. It's a beautiful county, by the way. It's totally different than New York City, but it's right there. I mean, like 15 minutes out of the city. And that's where they landed a plane up at White Plains and unloaded, I guess, a couple of hundred illegals and got them on buses, took them to a Costco store and let them go shopping and turned them loose. That's what's happening all over the country. It's pretty frightening.
Now, if you're seeing this, I know you've enjoyed that video. I mean, how could you not, after all? So you know what you should do? Leave a like, click on the subscribe button below, and hit the notification bell next to it so you'll always know when I have another video up for you to enjoy.